Hello, I'm Sebastian Michael, and this is this Saturday's sonnet. Beshrew that heart that makes my heart to groan, for that deep wound it gives my friend and me. Is not enough to torture me alone, but slave to slavery my sweetest friend must be. Me from myself thy cruel eye hath taken, and my next self thou harder hast engrossed. Of him, myself, and thee I am forsaken, a torment thrice threefold thus to be crossed. Prison my heart in thy steel bosom's ward, but then my friend's heart let my poor heart bail. Whoe'er keeps me, let my heart be his guard. Thou canst not then use rigour in my jail. And yet thou wilt, for I, being pent in thee, perforce am thine, and all that is in me. And this is the quite remarkably touching, really quite moving, and also quite extraordinarily revealing sonnet 133. And the very first thing I need to say about this sonnet is that it does not stand on its own. It comes in a pairing with sonnet 134, in the way that we have seen on a number of occasions when I, the poet, write a sonnet and then continue the thought in a second, sometimes even a third sonnet. So even though I will only be talking about 133 in detail, because otherwise this episode will simply go on for too long, it is worth reading it in conjunction with 134, or to simply then go to the sonnets and read, or they are all posted on YouTube, of course, just listen to 134 as well, because this thought takes on a whole additional twist, and quite a strong statement is being made at the end there, which I will get to in a moment. It's worth pointing out a few things that also pertain particularly to sonnet 134. But this is sonnet 133. Technically it sits in last week's batch. I've already explained this. It doesn't really matter because these batches are irrelevant. They will become insignificant once the whole series is up there. But it is number 133. Still, of course, very much part of the Dark Lady sequence. And you may remember that when we first spoke about the Dark Lady sonnets, I suggested there may be a good reason why some people believe that these Dark Lady sonnets were not actually written chronologically after the Fair Youth sonnets. They are published in sequence after the Fair Youth sonnets. The Fair Youth sonnets, they finish with 126, and with 127 we are into the Dark Lady sonnets. We have noticed this already, but we have quite compelling reasons to at least consider the possibility that these are not separate periods in the poet's life, and that I did not finish my relationship with the Fair Youth, or at least not finish writing about it, and then started a new relationship and continued writing about him only occasionally in these new sonnets that start after the last one of the Fair Youth sonnets, but that in fact I started writing these sonnets to a mysterious dark lady while I was in the middle of my relationship with the Fair Youth. And this is the first one of these sonnets that point towards such a possibility. Why? Because he's talking about his sweetest friend, the sweetest friend. Now we know who this sweetest friend is. This is the Fair Youth. And if this sonnet was written after number 126, in other words, after the 3 years plus, maybe 4 years, maybe a little bit longer, maybe a little bit less than 4 years, that the relationship, this very special friendship, the very passionate friendship with the Fair Youth lasted, then that would mean that either I have abandoned writing sonnets to my Fair Youth, to my young lover, but I am still in a friendship, in a relationship with him. He is still my sweetest friend, and now he is also having a relationship with this woman, the Dark Lady. This is possible. This is possible. But remember when we had, quite early on in the Fair Youth sequence, an instance where I was devastated, because what did my fair youth do in my absence? Well, he only went off with my mistress. And I said to him that thou hast her, it is not all my grief, that she hath thee is of my wailing chief. And I go to explain that what upsets me so much about this is not that you have slept around, I kind of know that you do, or even that you found it necessary to have, of all the people in the world, an affair with my own mistress, but that she has effectively stolen you from me, that I now am bereft of you, that you are no longer special to me. And I don't know whether you've ever experienced this, but I can sort of relate to this. I've been in situations personally, certainly, where I was being completely unreasonable because somebody I was even just being genuine, just being friends with, suddenly started a sexual relationship with somebody who was also in my circle of acquaintances more than friends, really. And I thought, well, this new cross relationship, that doesn't sit so easily with me. That makes me feel strangely sad and bereft, even though my brain tells me this is ridiculous, because I have no possession over any or over either of them. And in this case, of course, I, the poet William Shakespeare, am deeply besotted, deeply in love with the young man. So this would then mean that if the Dark Lady sequence chronologically comes after the Fair Youth sequence, if the Fair Youth sequence is finished and a new sequence starts, that would mean that either I am still in my special friendship with the Fair Youth, even though I do no longer address him directly in my sonnets to him, and then I am now upset because he's gone off with this Dark Lady, having done so previously, and knowing full well how I responded to that. And we went through a whole relationship crisis over this. Or it could also mean that my relationship with the Fair Youth has finished, and I'm referring to somebody else here who is now my sweetest friend. This is also a possibility. But we have to ask ourselves in these situations where we do not know for certain what is likely. And you've heard me say many times now that in the absence of certainty, likelihood is our friend. And I certainly would agree with those people who say it is maybe quite a bit more likely that this situation where my sweetest friend, my fair youth, is in a relationship with somebody who I'm having a relationship with as my mistress, and then I'm upset about this, that this is the same occasion, this is the same youth and the same lady. This would mean that the Dark Lady already features quite early on in the canon, quite a while back. That the lady we were talking about when our fair youth was having an affair with my mistress behind my back, and I was upset about that was already the Dark Lady. And that would mean that these sonnets dovetail. That means that they are actually written not absolutely in sequence, but that the Dark Lady sequence should really be slotted in where it fits with the Fair Youth sequence. This is a highly controversial statement to make, and certainly I have not reordered these sonnets because you get into a minefield of considerations then. And this is, after all, the sequence in which they were published, but it's worth bearing in mind that we may well be talking about the same characters all the way through. And I mentioned this in the context of this idea of likelihood and likelihood being our friend and what is likely and what isn't, because I would consider it to be really quite extraordinary, although this does not make it impossible. These people are quite extraordinary in their conduct of their emotional relationships and their sexual relationships and their friendships and everything. I mean, I would consider it quite extraordinary if, after everything we've been through, the young man and I, then exactly the same scenario were to unfold again, where he did the same thing again. It's possible. It is absolutely possible. We know that he is a young man who asserts his independence. We cannot rule this out. But it would still pose the question then, why, if my sweetest friend is still so important to me. Have I stopped writing sonnets to him? And now I'm only writing sonnets to the Dark Lady. I'm a very, very prolific writer. I'm a very fast writer. I can write sonnets really quite quickly, and I can write plays quite quickly. It would not be beyond me to do the same at the same time. Now, it's also possible, of course, that we simply do not have any more Fair Youth sonnets, not because they were never written, because we've lost them, but we also noted that the Fair Youth sequence seems to come to a deliberate end. The way that 126 ends without the final couplet points towards, again with no certainty, but it hints at there being a deliberate choice on my part, on the writer's part, to say, this is the last one I'm writing to you. There are 2 blank lines there. And this is the context in which we need to, or want to, look at sonnet 133 and 134. And if we do that, that does sort of mean that we then look at all the Dark Lady sonnets in a context whereby they may sit in parallel with the Fair Youth sonnets and not in sequence, if you like. So, what does it mean, sonnet 133? Beshrew that heart that makes my heart to groan for that deep wound it gives my friend and me. Full of powerful statements in just 2 lines. Beshrew that heart. Shame on that heart. Damned be, or it's a fairly mild condemnation, but it's a condemnation of the heart, that heart, that makes my heart to groan. Why does it groan? Groan is an expression of pain, of course, of burden. Groan for that, no beating about bush, for that deep wound it gives my friend and me. It gives my friend and me. Here the friend is already mentioned, so this is clearly not just about me, this is clearly also about the friend. And interesting that suggested in these 2 lines is that your heart, this is implied, that heart is clearly the Dark Lady's heart that does this, that heart gives a deep wound not only me but also to my friend. You're damaging to both of us. I say to my mistress. It is not enough to torture me alone, but slave to slavery my sweetest friend must be. Is it not enough that you should torture me with who you are, with your looks, with making me attracted to you? It's an interesting suggestion, of course, that the lady is to blame for the way I feel about her and that I am enslaved to her. Now, this is not the first time I've used the idea of being enslaved to the person I love. I have said the same thing to my lover, to the young man. I have called myself slave to him. So we don't need to read too much into this. This is an expression that I've used before. But I now say to the Dark Lady that I now ask the rhetorical question, is it not enough that you should make me your slave, but slave to slavery, my sweetest friend? And the sweetest friend, clearly, the sweetest friend cannot be anybody other than the Fair Youth. I'm pretty certain of that. It just does not, to my mind, make any sense to assume that I, having finished my relationship with the Fair Youth, start another one just like that with somebody else, because the language is so exalted in a way. It makes that person so very, very special. And then this slave to slavery, there are some questions that we could ask about what the exact meaning is. That is this just a way of emphasizing how much of a slave he has to be, or is there an additional layer of meaning that we don't quite get for some reason? Maybe because it's lost on us, or to do with class, to do with the sexual connotation as a slave to slavery. We don't know. But certainly what's very clear is that I'm asking the question, is it not enough that you should enslave me? Do you also have to enslave my sweetest, not just any old, my sweetest friend? Me, from myself, thy cruel eye hath taken. meaning that you have effectively seduced me. Your cruel eye, your seductive eye has taken me away from myself. I have lost all sense of being me. I have gone against my better knowledge, my better instinct, almost, you could say, or certainly my better judgment. And this is, again, not a new idea, that love makes us lose control. Love makes us, attraction makes us behave irrationally, and we start doing things that aren't our usual selves. That is not that new or original an idea. But not only that, but my next self, and again, this makes perfect sense. This is the fair youth. This is the person I'm thinking of as my other half, essentially, as my soul mate, the person I'm in a marriage of true minds with. Although, if what I just said earlier is true, and this sonnet was written earlier in the sequence, then I haven't said the thing about the marriage of true minds yet. But I'm certainly, this is very clear, of a mind that the fair youth is my other half, that he and I are as one. And my next self, the thing that the self next to me, who's so much a part of me that he's almost is a part of me, quite literally. My next self, thou harder hast engrossed. You have stretched out your tentacles and enveloped him in your powers, even stronger, even more potentially. This engrossed certainly has connotations of a negative thing. You have engrossed him, meaning that you have corrupted him, you have ensnared him harder than you have done me. And now the result of all of this is that of him, myself, and thee I am forsaken. You have all left me, all of you, all three of you, including me. My true self has gone, my next self, the fair youth, has gone, and you have gone by going off with somebody else, with him. Although, bracket, we are fairly clear that this dark lady is not an exclusive lover to me, the poet. He quite frequently complains about the fact that she is too free with her affections and love. It's really, I mean, very sexual, very clearly sexual favours. But it's still upsetting, and certainly it's extremely upsetting that this is happening now with the fair youth of all people. A torment, and then so much is upsetting. It's a torment thrice, threefold, thus to be crossed. And of course, to be crossed is this expression that on the one hand you're being crossed when people cross you, as in willfully, deliberately go against you and deliberately do something against you as a person, go behind your back, they cross you, they are untruthful, unfaithful, untrustworthy to and with you. And also the word crossed must surely, especially when it is put in the context of anything that's thrice threefold, then it acquires a religious connotation, and I bear this cross. I am being crucified by this. It's a torment to be thus crossed, to be thus crucified threefold. There's a religious connotation that comes in. I'm becoming the slaughtered victim of your misdeeds here. Quite strong. So I'm not happy about this. And then there's a plea. Prison my heart in thy steel bosom's ward. Prison is a verb here, and it means imprison. Go ahead and imprison my heart in thy steel bosom, in your hard, merciless bosom's ward. In your bosom is also your heart, and of course there's a double meaning there too, because bosom is also the woman's breasts. But interestingly, this is a steel bosom. This is not a soft, warm, cuddleable, nurturing bosom. This is a steel bosom, a hard bosom, and the ward is like a prison. Is a cell. Do so, prison my heart in thy steel bosom's ward. But if you do that, but then my friend's heart, let my poor heart bail. Let my poor heart, which you are imprisoning, bail out my friend's heart. In other words, imprison me, but in return for being allowed to, and for me staying in prison, let my friend go. this directly mirrors the strong sentiment I expressed back when we had this situation in the Fair Youth sonnets, that I want you back. I want you back. I don't mind all that much about the infidelity, your infidelity if you like, but I don't want you in that place. I don't want you in her heart. I want you back. I want you in my heart only. Whoever keeps me, let my heart be his guard. Now this we need to interpret this, we can't be entirely certain, but it seems to make most sense if we assume that what I'm saying is that whosoever keeps me, and in this case I just told you, the Dark Lady, that you can keep my heart in your prison, whoever that happens to be, let my heart be his guard, not the keeper of my heart, but because I've just spoken to a lady, so that would be her guard, but his guard, my sweetest friend, my love, the Fair Youth. In other words, you can, irrespective, no matter who imprisons me, who has me imprisoned in their heart, let my heart be the guard of my sweetest friend. That way I can protect him by being his guard. Do you see what I mean? Thou canst not then use rigour in my jail. Well, if I'm the warden, if I'm the guard, as in the prison guard, if I'm the person who keeps him, the Fair Youth, my sweetest friend, safe, but also in a way you could argue imprisoned, that's my prison, that means that I am responsible for him and I'm also protective of him. I can protect him, and you cannot use rigour, rigour being harshness, being strict punishment, being the severity of your seductive powers. They have no reach into my prison because I am the guard thereof. I am the warden there, and so you can't. Your reach is limited, if you like. But it doesn't go very far. I realise in the final couplet, and yet thou wilt, you will use rigour in my jail. For I, being pent in thee, I am pent up, I am imprisoned in thee. Perforce am thine, by force and by necessity, and this is a double meaning, of course, because perforce on the one hand by the force of your alluring features, your attractiveness, your seductive powers, your wiliness as well. There's always a double meaning there. There's always a sense that the woman is doing something bad here. It has to be said that this is not a very friendly poem. This is not a very friendly positioning. I'm not being particularly grateful for being seduced in this way. Perforce by both the force of your powers, but also perforce by necessity, because this is the way it is. I am thine, being pent in thee as I am, and all that is in me, everything that is in me, including my sweetest friend who is in my heart, where I want to guard him, is also pent up in your heart. There is no escape. It's troubling. I mean, it's horrendous, really, but it's troubling, and that's the state of mind I'm in. I'm really not happy about this, and I really don't want it to be this way. And this is where it's worth having a look, at least quickly, at the following, the ensuing sonnet that continues this thought, 134. This is why I don't think we can look at 133 in isolation, because there we continue saying, so now I have confessed that he is thine, and I myself am mortgaged to thy will. And then there's a fairly complicated and slightly convoluted explanation of how he has effectively come to you on my behalf, speaking on my behalf, and now you're imprisoning him, and you're effectively, because thou art covetous, I tell my dark lady, thou art covetous, and he is kind. He's kind of young and innocent and kind, and he fell for you. And you now have him too, and I admit that you have him too. And then I continue this slightly legalese type of argument, and then I just want to look at the final couplet, because that says, him I have lost, thou hast both him and me. He pays the whole, and yet I am not free. And in order for this to make sense, we kind of have to read 134 in full and read and analyze this legalese argument where I go on about how you are a usurer and my friend came as a debtor to you and now he pays the whole. In other words, he pays the whole debt and yet I am still not free. But the way this is written here, another strong sexual connotation. And again, I really am not happy about this. I'm really not. I'm really jealous. It's just a very simple case of me being quite categorically miffed that he's sleeping with you. You have seduced him. I've lost him to you. I feel I've lost him to you. This is a terrible, terrible feeling of emptiness that comes in to my emotions here. And I know, I personally, Sebastian Michael, I personally kind of know what this feels like. I feel I've sort of been there. It's inexplicable and it's completely irrational. Because always remember, this is always, all of this, always remember that me, William Shakespeare, the poet, while I am going on about this, while I am unhappy about my best friend's infidelity, about the fact that my mistress has ensnared him, has seduced him, has stolen him from me, I'm always married back home in Stratford upon Avon with children. I am not faithful. I am not a faithful husband. I am not even a faithful lover to my sweetest friend, my next self, my God in love. I have a mistress, for heaven's sake. Only the mistress is now having a relationship with my friend, or he with her, or they now have a thing going on. Very, very unhappy about this, and not just on an intellectual, not just on a mental level, not just because it jars with my sense of propriety, if you like, but because it deeply hurts. It just wounds that he does that now. To think the two of them together, it's just not right for me, and that's where I'm at. I'm in this turmoil. I'm in this hell. I've called it a hell, and I think it is a hell. I'm so conflicted about this. And this is absolutely fascinating. And so wonderfully human as well, of course, so wonderfully human and humane. How does it continue? Well, pretty much I continue in a similar vein, except over the next two sonnets, 135 and 136, I go to town over punning on my name. I almost overload. I even use the word overplus in one of these sonnets, and I go a bit overplus on the punning of my name, because here I start using the term will to mean all manner of things. I mean, all manner of things. I mean, that's the obvious mild slang that your will is also your willy, your penis. That's no big secret, and I pun heavily on that. But I also pun on the lady's will, meaning very possibly her generosity with her sexual organs, with her sexual availability. I tell her how welcome will is with her, and how can it be that other people's will is so generally generally welcomed and mine is not. It feels almost like I've had a few too many and now decided to just put it all down as wittily as I possibly can. And it's the kind of sonnets really that then the next morning when you read them, they maybe aren't quite as witty as maybe they were when you'd had a few. But who are we to know? Who are we to know exactly? But it sort of follows. I mean, if we think about the trajectory, and if we think about the story and about the characters, it sort of follows that here I am, frustrated and disappointed and bereft of my friend. And what do? I'm sort of powerless to do anything about him. What do? Well, I go into what I do best, which is I go into my linguistic dexterity, I go into word overdrive to vent my frustration and my anger, and that's what I do. And then 137, so that's 135 and 136, then 137 is much more serious again, where I almost lament my foolishness thou blind fool, love, love personified with a capital L, thou blind fool, love, what dost thou to mine eyes, that they behold and see not what they see? And I bemoan a bit, but I more lament. I lament the fact that love is making me blind. I see who you are, I see your unfaithfulness, and I pretend it is not so. Why of eyes falsehood hast thou forged hooks, where to the judgment of my heart so I lose a sense of judgment? All mine eyes seeing this say this is not. I lie to myself. I know that what I'm looking at is not a several plot. It's not a private area that just belongs to me, meaning you, the Dark Lady. But in fact, my heart knows it is the wide world's commonplace. I'm in no illusions about my Dark Lady. I know she's not faithful to me. I know she's not exclusive to me. I know she has sex with other people, by the sounds of it, the wide world, by the sounds of it, a lot of other people. And I know this, and yet I pretend it isn't so. And I resign myself into saying, well, in things right true, my heart and eyes have erred, and to this false plague are they now transferred. And that's how I leave things at the end of this week. Not a happy bunny, and not in the fresh blooming flower of an innocent and gorgeous love. I feel horrendous about this. This is really quite clear that I am not happy, and I'm down about really everything, about losing my beautiful young friend to you, and about your promiscuity, and about my delusions, and my self-deception, and my self-esteem has gone right down to rock bottom, it seems. Luckily, there are more sonnets to look forward to. This is not how it ends. And so, on this, not so happy, but maybe a little bit depressing and depressed, maybe a bit pensive and maybe a bit melancholy. But this seems more than melancholy. This seems kind of a fairly blue, a fairly void mood. Do still remember love is the power, and see you next week.